Publicis Sapient was named among the Horizon 3 market leaders in the HFS Horizon's Generative Enterprise Services report. This report, the industry's first to compare global professional services firms for their services in this space, became our largest to date, with 35 global services and advisory companies compared. One of the reasons Publicis Sapient stood out for us is the way in which it leverages its integrated speed capabilities to help drive value for clients on their generative enterprise journeys. Speed stands for strategy, product, experience, engineering, and data and AI. In each of this short series of HFS videocasts, I'm joined by a Publicis Sapient leader to explain the impact of one strand of the speed approach as applied to generative enterprise services. And in this edition, it's Dan Lieberman, who looks after the S for strategy of the speed approach. Dan, welcome.
Thank you, David.
So, how does your strategy team integrate generative AI in digital business transformation for your clients?
First, the strategy looks at the new value equation of generative AI and how that changes the possibilities in digital business transformation. So this can span from the opportunity to create net new businesses, to transform existing businesses, and to drive efficiencies, is a lot of companies are looking at in the near term in current businesses. As clients are looking beyond the pilots that dominated the last year, a key question now is how to get value at the enterprise level. And strategy helps identify those value drivers that GenAI can enable. And we then work to model either the revenue uplift or the efficiency opportunities of applying generative AI to a company's business. The second thing that strategy does is when we do the actual strategy phase of our work before we go into building digital products, strategy is the conductor and the integrator of when we develop GenAI strategies. So we're responsible for connecting the different speed capabilities that you mentioned earlier in what is a very complex and highly dimensional problem space.
Thanks, Dan. Just a thought on that. It's an immensely complex space. A lot of people are talking about the difference between, let's say, generating some productivity bonuses for the individual versus productivity bonuses across an entire process. Is that part of where the strategy piece comes in, to try to stitch together across the entire enterprise a value chain that would be ordinarily just left to, I don't know, a few people try and co-pilot on their own?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's two things. Sometimes it's the value of individual implementation and understanding if it is worth, whether it be an efficiency perspective or an opportunity to create greater efficacy as we're doing on some projects, looking at that individual application. But it is also at looking at what strategy would traditionally do, which is identify the where to play and how to win of the broader enterprise opportunity.
Okay. So for you, what does good look like at the moment? What does great look like in this space?
GenAI on its own is not a strategy, right? It's just an enabler. It's obviously driving a lot of strategic interest right now, which we think is great, but it in and of itself is not a strategy. But what is super exciting about GenAI is that it changes the possibility of what businesses can achieve. And for us at Sapient that do digital business transformation, that means there's a whole new world of possibilities. We also think that great GenAI strategies are a mix of bottom up and top down. It's part of the way we do strategy here. So they're bottom up in that when we work together, we work with our engineering colleagues, for example, to make sure the technology can actually enable the value that we think is required. And we work with our experienced colleagues to make sure that users are actually going to be able to use the products to deliver the value that we would create.
So how are you managing the upskilling or the training of people? What do you see as the key skills that actually need to be increased in the business, or were not as available as you would have liked maybe 12 months ago, 6 months ago, or even now? What's sure? Because it's different, isn't it? This some of the things we need for this kind of thinking around the generative enterprise is less engineering in its mindset and a little more focused on the questions to ask, less the answers to give. So how have you tackled that then?
You could have had a decade of experience in e-commerce, or you could have had a decade of experience in digital marketing as a strategy expert. And now you have this new realm where even if you were an expert last week, you may not be an expert this week. And so that requires that our strategists are one, just comfortable with the ambiguity that the space requires, and also that give them the grace that we know that expertise um, is as recent as the last week or last month. And and in some ways for us, it's really exciting because it means the space is so uncertain. The questions are so unknown in some ways that we have to build our own playbook. The other thing that's really important is that we don't lose sight of our core competencies as strategists. And in some ways, when you face this very uncertain and rapidly changing space, you can't just default to expertise. You have to go back to sort of those core competencies of identifying value and structuring problems that are now in some ways more important than ever. And so for us, we think of that as being the difference between advising clients to go for the valuable as opposed to the cool. We stick to our core competencies. We can make sure we advise clients to go to where the value is. And so in that sense, we don't want to change our skill set. We want to double down on who we are.
Dan, thank you very much for your time. Been really interested in speaking with you. It's a great start to the speed integration of talents and skills that you guys have. So Dan represents S for strategy. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, David.